Hey guys, Chris here, and I want to focus the video today on why we see the bad outside in the world. Why, particularly at the moment, you might be seeing the levels of corruption in government. You might just not want to believe one thing that the mainstream media is saying, and it seems so obvious that maybe stuff isn't true, and you're pointing it out to people, and people don't believe you, and they think you're crazy. It could be the pharmaceutical industries and big pharma, and you could be like, well, we don't need to take tablets, we can just be meditating and doing trauma release work or psychedelics or whatever, and all the money systems being manipulated, and how you can sort of see this and other people can't. And first of all, I want to say that that is a gift, and what I want to focus on today is understanding that that's it's a responsibility of you as well, and it's how to use that as interpersonal power. And not stay as a victim. So for me, particularly after I did ayahuasca, I went on this really deep, dark journey into my psyche, and how I think after that I then started to see certain things in the world which I didn't think would be true. Obviously very horrific things, and I thought, is this sort of level of abuse or things like this happening in the world? And only once I researched this sort of stuff I did start to see it is actually happening, and it's true. And obviously you could say this is a bit more down the conspiracy theory route, but that's obviously, with a lot of this stuff, we don't really know the truth. We don't perhaps know what happens, but if you sort of understand your shadow more, your shadow is the part that you don't see, and for most people that is the part that they don't see in the world. So if you're seeing certain things now, it's because you've seen it in yourself, and you're still on this journey maybe of healing that part of yourself. And for a lot of us, what we do is we project outwards, we shadow project. So if it's something to do with greed, we're on this, we're focusing at a billionaire or something like that, but we're kind of aware of ourselves, that greed in ourselves, but we've probably not fully healed it, so there's perhaps not that compassion. So we are still pointing people outside as an enemy, and that's what we do, and that's why we're seeing things out in the world. We're stuff is around us, and I think people who are very focused on pointing the finger at other people, is sort of a level of unawareness of how they can heal themselves. I've been to a few protests, and back in the day, a year ago, I was a bit more angry, pointing my finger at certain people, but now it's like I don't really necessarily see an enemy. I see more, this is part of myself and it's part of the journey, and yes, there are certain people who are acting that out, and at least I can sort of point my finger calmly and say, okay, that's something wrong, or that's something bad, or you can't necessarily say it's wrong or bad, but it's the opposite of love and the divine sort of way of living. But I would say to people who are of this, and you do see the enemy as being out there and problems in the world, and no matter what level you're at, I feel like everyone has a responsibility. And I think for people who don't see these sort of problems, these what I consider to be really important issues in the world, like for example people who are getting caught up in the mainstream media, and getting involved in different debates or whatever. This topic seems hot right now, whatever the royal family are doing, whatever seems to be going down. But if you're not in that area and you're sort of seeing that as being a bit more of more as like the propaganda and stuff that's happening, manipulating billionaires making money from all medications and stuff like that, then you have a responsibility to use that and to empower people, and using that responsibility, you can remain a victim, and I think the first stage is to identify a problem, then it's to find the solution, and the solution always comes from healing that part of yourself, looking within. I think we're here to grow, we're here to in this life to grow as much as possible spiritually, understanding more about ourselves. For people who'll say, well, we're all one, well, if you really believe that we're all one, then it's looking to improve that part of yourself, to heal that part of yourself. What is that enemy outside of yourself teaching you? I've had enemies throughout my life, people I grew up with, people who weren't very nice to me, But as I began to understand that part of myself, I healed that part of myself, and I also forgive them and had compassion for them. So use this as a test. And I think sometimes, like with Buddhism and stuff, it's like, well, have compassion to your enemies, and try and pray on compassion for like politicians and stuff like that. But that can be one way of doing it. But I've also found a way of just really understanding, what is that part of you that's showing out. And for those people who don't see it, I believe they don't see it because they aren't aware of their own shadow. They're completely shut off to their shadow. So as you start to do shadow work, you actually breathe and you actually think and you go, oh, what is this teaching me outside? And I think there is responsibility there. And use the energy not trying to wake people up. If you're wasting your time trying to wake people up who aren't aware of their own shadow, who deny that a shadow actually even exists, that the problem's always out there, that someone you're around and they start pointing the finger at someone for doing something and you're like, well, I clearly see they do this, and then you tell them and they get very defensive and they say, that's not me, then you're wasting your time with those kind of people. Instead, put your energy into people who are on the verge of maybe making some sort of breakthrough, who go, you know what, I don't think I understand what the mainstream media are telling me. I took all this medication and I actually feel worse. Use your time focusing on those people. And if you use your time focusing on those people, you can empower them. Like I learned the same thing with my self-development work and my meetups. Focus on the people who want to take action, who want to get up and they want to step out of their comfort zone. And for so long I helped people who weren't willing to do that, or I tried to help people who just wanted to remain a victim. And this is the final part I was going to say is, you have to jump out of that feeling of victim. As I learned from my Bufo journey, if you're like, the problem is out there and they are doing this, and then normally people will talk about this like they, which seems to be a common thing in the kind of conspiracy theory world, that it's they are the problem. It's projected outside and you don't see what's in you, and then all of a sudden you look around for people who can confirm your victim story. So you surround yourself with other victims, and that's not to say that those people get away from them and find people who you lead by example. And I can't, how many times I've done this, the more I lead by example, I now look around me and my friends are starting to have the same opinion. So as you change, they change, or as you change, they see you as a empowering leader, and they won't really debate. When people are staying in victim and you're kind of acting in a more empowering way, it's sometimes hard to remain with that person who's debating that, why it's just so important to remain a victim. And some people will, though, and I've noticed that on my journey as well. Some people do. Some people just want to keep researching stuff, looking into stuff, and I would say that from my ayahuasca journey, intuitively, I felt that, I felt the sort of darker stuff, what I believe are like darker forces are like occupying the planet, because I felt them and seen that kind of energy. But I also understand that that's part of myself, that's part of my own psyche, and once you feel that and once you know that, it exists. And you don't really need a conspiracy theory to pointing it out, because it's true. So that's my side. You trust your feelings. If someone's saying something and you're like, well, this isn't clear, this is no evidence here, but it is. And I think that's the great thing that's happening at the moment. Everything is raising consciousness, and we're seeing more of a collective shadow, which is now coming from behind. Like, I didn't know how the financial system worked. And now I've been reading books and stuff and seeing how it's like how the money is being created and manipulated. I didn't see that a while ago, and everyone around me is now seeing it as well. So there is a massive awakening and change in level of consciousness, and it's come out of the shadow. So to me now, it's no longer a shadow. It's something I understand in myself, but also something I see in the world. But to some people, that is still their shadow. Because it's not like mainstream news, or it's not so in your face. But people, for a while, they were into all, people I know, like shamans, who sort of said 20, 30 years ago, they seen a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing now, And then they said back then nobody's seen it, and now there's a bigger thing. You go to some of these protests now in London, which last one I was at, it was hundreds of like 1,000 people, over 100,000 people, something like that. There were loads of people, so people are seeing things differently now. So that's the good news, and you can only do your part. So that's what I would say. And in this next video I want to go into a bit more about how you can find peace, and you don't, mainly from not following the system. If you kind of fight the system or follow the system in some way, you're still, in the system, and the job is to jump out of it, mentally. But yeah, I hope you found that video useful, guys. Remember, it's about taking personal responsibility, and it's good that you have a gift and you see things differently, understanding why, wasting time trying to wake people up or loved ones to see certain things you see. They're just going to reject it, because they're not willing to look at their own shadow. Everything outside is a reflection of them. If they're codependent, they would be codependent on the government. So that's kind of how it works. That's my understanding anyway. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and see you soon.